Hello and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Marta, but you can just call me Em. And what we do on this channel is mainly talk about books, but we do also sometimes dabble into studying, life abroad, and just life in general. March was a very hectic month for me, and looking into April, it doesn't really look like things are going to change that much when it comes to pace. If anything, I feel like April is actually going to be much more hectic, May even more, because I have some really big changes coming up in my life. But the one constant thing that I can always count on is books, right? It's books and reading, and that helps me relax and kind of keep myself from going crazy. Now, I hope that your March was a lot less hectic than mine was, and I also hope that you read some really good books, because I surprisingly read a bunch of 5-star reads. Well, not a bunch, like a couple, I think, 2 or 3. But that's a lot, I would say, and I'm very excited to share them with you. However, before we get to the 5 stars, we are going to start with the letdowns. The first book we're going to talk about today was an arc from NetGalley. NetGalley, thank you. This is the one time of this video I'm going to say thank you, NetGalley, because there's a lot of arcs on this list, so I'm just not going to keep repeating myself. But NetGalley, thank you. Anyway, we are starting with the Wycherleys, which is basically Bridgerton but with magic. It's a YA Regency fantasy that is very, very easy to read, okay? And the writing style, the prose, it's really light and easy to digest. Now let's talk about the plot and story itself, and I am going to try and keep it short because I think we are going through, 8 or 9 books this month, so we're trying to be brief. So in the world of Wycherleys, we have magical families, like magical noble, I would say, families, and once kids come of age, they make their debut in high society. In magic high society. And once they do, they have, I think it was 3 years to find their partner who's going to be their tether, I would say, maybe. If in those 3 years you don't find a partner to help you use your magic, you are going to gradually start losing your magic. And then you pretty much become an outcast, right? So we don't want that. We need to find a partner. However, our main character is actually cursed, and it's a hereditary curse, a magical curse that is passed down through generations only in her family, and her family was cursed by a rival family, and guess who the main love interest is going to be? Of course, the dude from that family. Because she is cursed, no one really wants to, become her partner. But here, we start having the fake dating plot, because for some specific reasons, the dude from that rival family is going to fake date her. Of course, that grows into love and blah 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 blah. We also have like a murder mystery going on. That is basically the premise of the book. The world itself is like a very bright, very cheerful world, I would say. There are some hints of like dark magic, but you don't really get anything that takes away from that brightness. So it's very chill and relaxing. So if you want more of, let's say, not really cozy magical vibes, but just like whimsical Regency magical vibes, then you might like this. As I said, it is a YA book, okay? And I had to keep reminding myself that it is a YA book, so I can't really expect a very complex magic system. I can't really expect that much character depth, but also that's not really an excuse, because the characters were rather inconsistent, and quite often it felt like their personality changed just so they could fit the plot or where the author wanted us to go, and that was a pretty big letdown. And yes, I keep saying that it's a Regency book, but it's Regency in name only, because there is so much modern language in this book. There is no historical accuracy. Well, there is some, but you can't really count on it being historically accurately when it comes to the Regency period. And just the way that the characters spoke quite often took me out of the story because it just really did not fit the setting. Looking at my Goodreads review, which I wrote about a month ago, there's a point about the magic system which I quite like, and it just says, magic system? What magic system? No rules, no structure, just vibes. Now, the mystery element of the book wasn't really that much of a mystery. It was very clear who the evil dude was. But again, it's a YA book. I shouldn't be expecting too much, so I'm not really deducting points because of that. However, what I am deducting points, and what made me reconsider my initial 3-star rating, it was the love story. Because within the last 100 pages, there were so many love confessions, pledges of undying, eternal love that just made me gag. And it was just so random. I couldn't. I feel like this just was not the book for me, and I give it a 2 out of 5. Next up, we have The Unlikely Pursuit of Mary Bennet. Now, I love Pride and Prejudice, one of my favorite books. I was kind of looking for a retelling in a way. At this point, it's just Pride and Prejudice fanfiction, but with different characters. That's what it is. You can't tell me the retellings of Pride and Prejudice aren't just fanfictions. With this book, I actually did not expect what I got. Probably because I didn't really take the time to read the summary before applying for it on NetGalley. Because I just read, Pride and Prejudice retelling. Mary Bennet. Might as well. Now, this is actually mainly a story about Charlotte, the one that marries the cousin of the Bennets in Pride and Prejudice. And in the story, what was his name? Mr. Collins. And in the story, Mr. Collins passes away. And so Charlotte is now a widow. Mary Bennet goes and visits her to kind of show support. Well, I don't know. Wait, I think Mary Bennet was on her way to somewhere else and she just stopped at Charlotte's place. But it had been years since they've met. No, since they've met, since they've seen each other, right? And now they're starting to become friends, but they fall in love, and there's a lot of will they, one day at the beginning, like there's this tension, right? Because of, the way society works back then, with Charlotte trying to kind of accept the feelings that she's having. And from the beginning, the story had me smiling, and it was just very delightful to read because at least the first chapter really embraced the world and the writing of Jane Austen. But then that slowly started dwindling down, and the writing style and the prose that we began the book with just kind of started slipping away as we went further into the book. And that was a big letdown for me. Because when it comes to Jane Austen retellings, it's not so much about the story that we are being told, as much as it is about the way the story is written. Because Jane Austen has this very characteristic style of writing that this book lacked. I was looking for social critique and irony and the sharp wit and kind of the subtle way of making fun of people and situations and just the era itself, but that just was not given to me, I did also have a problem with the way the relationship was developed and the side characters, because I feel like the story kind of created this unrealistic, rather utopian world when it comes to LGBTQ relationships and women choosing not to remarry, as there was either very unusual support or there was just outright indifference, which historically just doesn't really sit right with me. I know that there's a difference in the way that male relationships were perceived compared to female relationships. But from what I've read and studied, it definitely was not as accepted and even celebrated to the extent that it is in this book. And especially the ending of the book itself came so out of nowhere. It just really felt like a happily ever after. And that for me was also a big letdown. There was also smut in this book, which I did not expect because it's a Jane Austen book, a Jane Austen retelling, and I don't really associate Jane Austen with writing that type of scenes. That's not something I'm deducting points for, it's just not something I was prepared to experience reading this book, so that's a fair warning. Not sure if I mentioned that this was also an arc, but it was an arc, and it gets a 3 out of 5. I actually forgot about another 2-star read, and I think it speaks for itself that I forgot about it, but it's The Chosen Queen, which is another retelling, but this time of Camelot. And it's also another arc. This book tells us the story of King Arthur's mother and what happened before King Arthur's birth. I was actually rather sad to give it 2 stars because the writing was actually lovely. The prose itself was magical. It really immersed you into the story, into the world itself. And you could definitely tell that the author did a lot of historical research. But the reason it let me down is because while yes, it is beautiful writing, at the same time, it gets caught up in so many details that it just starts to drag. And it was not just details of setting and the world itself, it was also details of people and emotions, and it just got so much that I did end up skim reading a lot after I'd say about halfway through the book, which is never really a good sign for me, because I ended up having to force myself to keep reading, and it took me 2 weeks to finish the book, which for me is an abnormally long time to finish a book, unless it's Brandon Sanderson, because I need to take breaks. If you look on Goodreads, you will see that next to the title, you have a feminist retelling of Camelot, which again set the expectations way off from what I was presented with, because to me, the way the women were portrayed in this book was rather problematic. And I understand that the book touches upon some very serious issues when it comes to women's agency over their bodies at that historical time. But I very much feel like the women were written a lot more like these idolized women viewed from specifically from the male gaze, and they didn't really feel like real and well-developed people. Based on the story it's telling, based on what happens to King Arthur's mom, based on the historical setting, I would normally say that that's understandable and it's okay and it goes well with the story we're being told. However, the whole story was told from King Arthur's mom's perspective. And I keep saying King Arthur's mom because I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. Okay, that's the only reason. It's all written from her perspective, and for me, it just doesn't make sense for women to be portrayed in that way when it's all coming from that specific character's perspective. I don't know, it just was not believable to me, right? And I couldn't really get myself into the story and into that specific character's narrative. With all of that said, The Chosen Queen gets a 2 out of 5. The next book actually wasn't planned at all. I got it from a bookshop in Camden Town that does blind dates with a book. And for this one, all I knew was that it had a family of outlaws, enemies to lovers trope, forbidding land, and secret plots. And what I actually ended up getting was Dance of Thieves, which coincidentally my best friend has been wanting to read for some time now, and she actually had a copy of it at home. So when I told her I was reading this, she immediately wanted to read it together. We ended up reading this as a book for our 2-person book club, so that was a fun coincidence. And I'm very happy I read it together with her because honestly, I needed to vent about this with someone. Okay, I'm going to stay here because the sun is kind of blinding. And you might think that I can just close the curtains, but then if I do, then I have to turn on the light. And when I turn on the light, it gets a little bit too dark. So this is the struggle I have with this room when it comes to lighting, but very soon I will no longer have this problem. Because I said big changes are coming. But what they are, I will not tell you yet. So this is another YA fantasy book. It's a romantasy. And the story is told from the POVs of our two main characters, okay? And it's from the first person, which I am not really a fan of. Some of you might know that. For anyone who doesn't know it, I'm not really a fan of first-person POVs, and I especially hate it when a book is a multi-POV book from the first person. But it is what it is, and it took me a while to get used to it. Once I got used to it, it was fine. I am so thankful we didn't add any more POVs, because if we had 3 or more, I would have probably DNF'd it, okay? It just makes me feel like I have a split personality disorder. Now, our main female character is a former thief, an exceptional thief, that has become a part of, I'd say, the royal army/guard of the queen of another land, or like the special forces. And our main guy is the heir that is now inheriting a city of outlaws. His dad has just died and he's inheriting it, and his family is like very close, which is where the found family, the family of outlaws trope comes, which I think at some point progresses to found family. But anyway, we are introduced to the characters very quickly, and they are tied together very quickly. If I could sum the plot of this book, it will pretty much just be an inheritance game with drama and love and violence, but there really isn't anything much to add to that. And yes, we are given hints of something bigger, of a bigger plot, of bigger conspiracies and of a bigger magical worlds, but we don't really get much of that. Also, the main conflict between the girl and the boy is that she's actually there to investigate him and his family and some other people. God, okay, no, I am pulling the curtains. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I will fix this in post. Now, another issue with this book is that from the beginning, we are introduced to so many side characters. And I don't really see why we had to be introduced to them so quickly and to so many of them, because it took me a while to remember who was who. We also get a bunch of foreign words, and I would say world-specific things that we are supposed to understand or connect together and remember. And at the same time, there is no glossary. So we really have to remember everything and try to connect things and understand them. And by that, I mean words like Zith and Straja, which, yes, in the context, you understand what they're saying. But why are we just given these words when we could just be using the normal words, like English words? Because they're not actually explained to be from a different language, which we do get use of, like a different foreign language in this book. We just get the sentences spoken in a foreign language without us knowing what the hell the people are saying. But it's not even that, it's just these random foreign words dumped within the story. Why? Every character in this book is like extra edgy, and that's their whole personality. The edginess and their trauma is their whole personality. And that for me is just very lazy writing. Also, there is something that really, really pissed me off, and that is that the description of locations don't really match the map we are given. And I will give you an example because it was driving me crazy the whole time. Just give me a second. So, it says that the city of Hellsmouth was just inside the border of Icelandia, a lesser kingdom shaped like a large falling tear, and Hellsmouth was at its apex. Okay, now I will show you the map. Okay, Okay, now, can you see? Is it blurry or do you have to... Wait, I'll manually do the thingy. Show you the map. Map. Focus on the map. Okay, so here we have Icelandia, right? And here we have Housemouth. Right. Now, how is this just inside the border of Icelandia? And how is this in the shape of a falling tear? Or is it just me? Is a problem with my television? Am I the problem? And you might say that it's only just this one bit of the book and maybe it's, I don't know, they got it wrong once. But we have it again, where it says, the kingdom's borders were redrawn, reaching height to include Housemouth, which explained the odd tear-shaped kingdom. What tear-shaped kingdom? And the thing is, okay, yes, I'm very frustrated with this book. But at the same time, what's even more frustrating is that the writing itself, the prose, is actually good, in my opinion. And I enjoyed it, right? I enjoy the way the author writes. Apart from the dialogues, because they are rather cringe, like really cringe. But everything else was just, well, written. Honestly, I had no plans of reading the second book because this is a duology. But then I just read the final chapter and then I was like, hell. Now this might be actually interesting. And so I got the second book. I did get the second book and I will read it at some point. I was actually planning on reading it right after the first one because I thought that if I don't do it, I will lose momentum and then I'm just not going to read it. But then book number 2 arrived and I opened the book. I read chapter 2 because chapter 1 is like 1 page and you get it at the end of this first book. So, okay, I read chapter 2, which in my head is actually chapter 1. And the first sentence is the following. Jace walked through the door as naked as a peeled orange. And then I just closed the book. And I left it to the side. And I refused to read it until my friend is ready to read it as well, because I am not reading this alone, because this is so frustrating to me. Who starts a book with a sentence like that? I am already annoyed. I am already frustrated. For me, this is already bad writing, okay? Some would say it's funny. It's bad writing to me. Anyway, this book is frustrating, but still, I will read the second book, and I am giving Dance of Thieves 3 out of 5. We are moving on to another arc and another retelling, but this retelling is actually about Peter Pan and Sherlock Holmes. This ended up being such a pleasant surprise. I really was not expecting to enjoy this book as much as I did. It took me a while to start reading it because that's I think the first book that I was approved for on NetGalley, but then I just kept putting it off because I thought that I probably wouldn't enjoy it as much, but I did. I really did. So in this book we have Mary Darling, who is the niece of John Watson, and Mary is married to George, and what happens is that one night Mary and George's kids are taken by Peter Pan. George, because of the trauma he's experienced during his time with Peter, refuses to accept that his children are taken by Peter Pan, while Mary is determined to go and get her kids back. At the same time, John Watson and Sherlock Holmes get involved because, John is Mary's uncle, and because, Sherlock Holmes, he loves to solve mysteries. So, they get involved, and of course, they don't believe that a magical flying child has taken the kids. So while they're working on the case, Mary is working on a way to get to Neverland. The story is told from multiple POVs, all from the third person. And we do get introduced to a variety of side characters. The way that their stories were being told and the way that we were introduced to them, at least to me, was very, very charming. And it added a lot of life to the book and the story itself. And together with the shifting perspectives, we do also jump back and forth in time. So the story is not told in a linear fashion. And I think that's another thing that kind of keeps you interested in the story, because you're like, okay, whose POV am I going to be reading from? And where will I be in time? And another thing about the way that the characters were being presented to us is that, at least to me, they actually felt real, and like they had their own authentic voices, and that they added to the story, and they were there for a reason, which I honestly think I haven't encountered before in retellings. So this was very, very refreshing, and I could definitely tell that with this story and with this retelling, the author herself actually had something to say and something to add to the story, including her own critique of the original Peter Pan story and her own interpretation of it. Because the original Peter Pan is presented to us as a children's story, in a way as a fairy tale, whereas I personally also believe that it's not actually a kid's story. It's rather dark and sad. It tells us a lot about abuse and manipulation, but it's wrapped in this bubble of magic and adventure. And I think a lot of people forget about how dark the story actually is, or don't even think about how dark it actually is. The book also presents us with a social commentary on the Victorian era, and you can definitely tell that it has been very well researched. This might sound a bit too much to some people, but if I had to choose which book my future child should read, whether it would be the original Peter Pan or whether it would be this retelling, I would actually pick this retelling. Okay, and I think these are very strong words, but honestly, that is how much I enjoyed this. So I am planning on buying my own copy, and The Adventures of Mary Darling gets a 4 out of 5. This will be a very short review because I can't review this book without spoiling, and that is Rhythm of War, Book 4 of the Stormlight Archive. It took me so long to read this, okay? I started reading this, I think, at the end of November, and I finished it I think somewhere in mid-March, okay? The reason why it took me so long is because it kept giving me anxiety, okay? I kept expecting things to go horribly wrong. It was such an intense read, and I needed to take breaks. Like, there was a point where I just didn't want to continue reading because I was like, oh no, something really bad's going to happen. I don't want to. Again, an amazing book by Brandon Sanderson. I would say, though, that compared to the first and the second book in the series, this felt a little bit lacking. I can't exactly pinpoint what was lacking, but it definitely did not give me the emotions that the first two books gave me, and I definitely did not enjoy it as much. By itself, it is a 5-star read, but within the Stormlight, I would give it a 4 out of 5. And now we are going to the absolutely ridiculous and delightful When the Moon Hits Your Eye, which was an arc. But once it came out, I just had to buy my own copy because this is absolutely probably one of the best books I will read this year. It's a gem. It's a gem of ridiculousness because the plot of this book... Here, are you ready? Here we go. The plot of this book is that the moon turns to cheese. But what kind of cheese? No, I think everyone wants an answer to that. We're not going to get an answer to that. But this is the kind of book that will have you laughing. But in some chapters, it may actually touch upon some emotions. It might actually make you sentimental. It may make you sad. But it offers so much. And each chapter is a day of the moon cycle. So we start with the first day of the moon turning to cheese, and then we go through the moon cycle. And each day we get another person's POV. A few times we return to previous characters, like the president, but in most chapters we have someone new. So we have the president, we have astronauts, scientists, we have a pastor, university students, grandpas, and my favorite, cheese shop owners. And while we are supposed to read this book and laugh, I think its other purpose is to make you think about the way our society works, because this is also a very sharp critique of society. My friend got approved for the arc as well, and we read it together, and we both got physical copies once it came out 5 out of 5. And we are ending with The Will of the Many, which for now it has been the biggest surprise for me this year. So this is a high fantasy that is tagged as a dark academia. Now that I have read it, I wouldn't really put it into the dark academia category, but I get why people put it there. But for me, this is just like pure high fantasy. And for some reason, I was dying to read it. It was like, it kept calling to me, right? And I went to, I think, 5 bookstores and they didn't have it. I ended up having to get it on Amazon. This might be my favorite fantasy of the year. So starting with, I would say, the magic system. It has a very interesting concept, I would say, that I really can't wait to see how it's going to be developed further, because there will be more books in the series. I don't know if it's going to be just 1 more or 2 more. I am hoping for more. Well, according to Goodreads, there's just going to be 1 more. Well, we'll see. I am hoping for it to be a bigger series because I really thoroughly enjoyed this book. I read it so fast. I really couldn't put it down because I just wanted to know what was going to happen next. Okay, anyway, magical system. You know what? No, I'm not going to tell you about the magical system because you should read it for yourself. But the world building does take inspiration from ancient Rome. And that is also reflected in the magical system as well. Our main character is the only survivor of a royal family and he is in hiding. And he hates the new political system republic that is now controlling the continent and pretty much everyone. He's also very much against the use of the magic there, which is what they call will. Because of his education and his refusal to partake in the magic, he gets the attention of a powerful man within the political system, and that man is looking for someone to adopt. So he adopts our main character, and our main character is sent to the academy, where the children of all the politicians and very important people are sent to get educated in how to use will. And he's sent there basically on a specific quest, like on a mission, and his life pretty much depends on him fulfilling that mission. And so we get him in the academy exploring the grounds and trying to fulfill that mission and also navigate society and politics. And it's a story that presents us with a mystery and then adds more mysteries to that mystery. And it's all told from that man's POV, that kid's POV, because he's like a teen at the end of his teens anyway. But I think the winning point for this book is the writing style itself. And for some reason, it reminds me of the Book of Amber, just the way that the main character is written and the way that he speaks and the way that he tells us the story. It's kind of like I'm back in a way into Corwin's head. For those of you who don't know, Corwin is the main protagonist of the Book of Amber. And maybe it's because it's both very succinct and also very real storytelling, but it just had me in its grips from the beginning. And I really cannot wait for the second book. I probably didn't really do a good job at selling the book to you, because I don't really know how to explain the plot to you. And I've noticed that is a struggle I have with the majority of the books that I really enjoy, and it's possibly because I enjoy them so much and I get so into them that I memorize pretty much everything, and then I don't know how to present it to you in a way that I won't spoil the book, or in a way that will be digestible to you, or in a way that would be short, or in a way that, I don't know, would get someone interested in the book. And sometimes there's just so much information. You know? It's kind of like how I can't talk about the Stormlight Archive without spoiling, how I can't talk about the Wheel of Time without spoiling. Because man, I have read that series 6 times, okay? And I can tell you that's the best series I have ever read for me, but if you ask me to tell you what it's about and to try to get you to read it, I will fail miserably. With that said, The Will of the Many gets a 5 out of 5. And that is all I have for you today. As I said, there are some big changes coming up, which possibly means that I will either stop uploading. I mean, not like completely stop uploading, but I will probably upload once a month. I'm going to go back to that schedule. Or I will upload more often, okay? There's no guarantees. On this channel, you never know when there's going to be another video because I do struggle with consistency, and when I don't struggle with consistency, life just gets in the way. But if you do enjoy people just ranting about books and sometimes life, I am here, okay? This channel is for you because I rant. The majority of the times I just rant. You would ask, don't you have people in your life to rant to? I do. I do. I just love ranting, okay? There's never enough ranting done in this world. As always, any book recommendations are welcome. I have a shelf on Goodreads where I record all of the recommendations I get, and I am very slowly getting through it. If you have read any of the books I've mentioned, please feel free to share your opinions. I would love to hear your own thoughts on some of these books, specifically maybe even the books I don't like, because I think it's important to get other people's perspectives and just see how they view the media that you consume. So if you want to share, please feel free to share. I hope you'll read some great books in April, and if you do pick up some of the books I recommended, please tell me what you thought about them. And with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time. Bye bye!